Have you ever had someone look you dead in the eye, wrap their arm around your shoulder and say, "I'm only telling you this because I care about you, but everyone else is laughing behind your back"? It feels like a punch to the gut, but you instantly lean into them because they feel like your only safe harbor. What if I told you that wasn't love, wasn't friendship, and wasn't even real advice? It was a calculated psychological anchor designed to make you completely dependent on them. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the most covert, high-level behavioral mechanics used by master manipulators, not so you can weaponize them, but because understanding the exact blueprint of psychological control is the ultimate catalyst for human transformation. When you decode the math behind why people behave the way they do, you stop being a pawn in their game and finally become the author of your own life. Let's dissect that initial sting, a mechanism known in advanced behavioral psychology as weaponized fake concern. When someone uses this, they are exploiting a fundamental human vulnerability, our deep-seated need for social safety and belonging. By framing a devastating, status-undermining piece of information as a protective secret, the manipulator achieves two things simultaneously. First, they shatter your self-esteem and induce a state of social anxiety. Second, they position themselves as your sole ally, the only person honest enough to protect you from a hostile world. To view this through an educational lens, it is a forced recalibration of your social baseline. They create a synthetic fire just so they can sell you the oxygen. Recognizing this behavior requires observing the ratio between the anxiety their concern causes you and the tangible positive solutions they offer. If their concern consistently leaves you feeling isolated from everyone except them, it isn't empathy, it is targeted psychological isolation. Once emotional isolation is established, the next logical phase in behavioral control shifts towards systemic dependency, which is almost always achieved by controlling money and material resources. Money, in a psychological sense, represents autonomy, choices, and freedom. When an individual or an entity begins to subtly restrict your financial independence, whether through forced transparency, criticizing your spending habits, or convincing you to hand over your financial decision-making under the guise of alleviating your stress, they are actively shrinking your world. In the study of human behavior, restricting financial agency is the fastest way to induce learned helplessness. When you control a person's capital, you control their physical geography, their caloric intake, and their exit strategies. True self-protection and mental improvement begin with the uncompromising preservation of your financial autonomy, ensuring that your life choices are dictated by your values, not by your survival needs. This control is sustained and reinforced over time through a highly addictive behavioral loop known as reward and punishment cycles. Drawing from classical conditioning principles, human beings are naturally wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. A master of manipulation will never treat you poorly all the time. Instead, they will deliberately alternate between intense validation and sudden unexplained withdrawal. One day you are showered with praise, gifts, and affection. The next, you are met with cold silence or harsh criticism for a boundary you didn't know you crossed. This unpredictable schedule of reinforcement triggers a massive dopamine spike in the human brain. You become hyper-focused on fixing the problem, constantly walking on eggshells, obsessively trying to earn back the reward phase. Understanding this cycle is a massive turning point for self-growth. Once you realize their withdrawal isn't a reflection of your worth, but a calculated tactic to keep you chasing their approval, the emotional spell is broken, and you can reclaim your cognitive peace. When the chaos of the reward and punishment cycle peaks, the manipulator will seamlessly pivot into playing the hero. This is a brilliant, albeit sinister, piece of psychological theater. The very person who covertly orchestrated your distress, caused your financial strain, or isolated you from your peers will suddenly step forward with a grand solution to rescue you. By becoming the savior of a crisis they secretly engineered, they earn your eternal gratitude, rewrite the narrative, and erase any suspicion you might have had about their toxicity. In educational psychology, this is a textbook example of creating a false dependency matrix. They break your leg just to hand you a crutch, ensuring that you view them as indispensable to your survival. True psychological awareness means evaluating people based on the stability they bring to your life, rather than the dramatic rescues they perform after a storm. Underpinning this entire system of control is the constant, underlying engine of creating confusion, commonly referred to as gaslighting. The human brain craves order, logic, and predictability. To destabilize a person's psyche, a manipulator will systematically distort the truth, deny documented realities, and twist conversations until you begin to question your own memory, perception, and sanity. They will confidently utter lies like, "I never said that," or "You are misremembering things as usual," with such conviction that your cognitive processing bottlenecks. When you can no longer trust your own senses, you naturally default to trusting theirs. This is the ultimate theft of human agency. Overcoming this requires an unshakable commitment to objective reality, grounding yourself in facts, journaling to preserve your timeline, and refusing to debate your baseline memories with anyone who profits from your confusion. To truly understand how these dynamics play out in the real world, we must examine how these exact psychological levers are applied to others in deep, systemic ways. The execution of these tactics relies entirely on a slow, imperceptible escalation. A manipulator never starts with overt control. They begin by testing your boundaries with minor infractions. They will use fake concern during a casual conversation to see if you accept their framing of your reality. They will offer to pay for everything or manage a joint account to subtly gauge your willingness to surrender financial visibility. They observe your reaction to a sudden bout of the silent treatment, measuring exactly how much anxiety it causes you. If you rationalize their behavior, apologize when you did nothing wrong, or alter your actions to appease them, you have inadvertently handed them the psychological playbook to your vulnerabilities. They deeply analyze your emotional triggers, your past traumas, and your deepest insecurities, and then they meticulously stitch these tactics into the fabric of your daily interactions until the manipulation feels like your own normal way of thinking. True human transformation and mental improvement happen the moment you refuse to participate in this script. By educating yourself on these dark psychological patterns, you develop an emotional immunity to them. You learn to recognize fake concern as an invasion of privacy, financial control as an assault on your freedom, inconsistent rewards as an addictive trap, heroic gestures as a distraction, and confusion as a direct attack on your reality. Self-protection isn't about becoming cynical or building walls. It is about developing a sharp analytical mind that sees human behavior for what it actually is, rather than what it pretends to be. When you possess the vocabulary to name the manipulation, it completely loses its power over you. The most dangerous predators don't come with fangs and claws. They come disguised as everything you ever wished for, wrapped in a blanket of false security. But remember, a shadow can only exist as long as you keep yourself in the dark. Turn on the light of absolute psychological awareness. Trust your intuition above anyone else's narrative, and refuse to let someone else hold the pen to your story.